Good morning, everyone. Uh, it's great to be here. It's always lovely to see so many ethical culturists gathered together. It makes me feel good and let me know that I'm not on my ethical journey alone. It's my pleasure to be here today. Our platform today is standing up to book banning. Library censorship is a topic fraught with diverse opinions and perspectives. Something that I might find offensive may not offend you at all, and vice versa. The problem arises when I want to ban a book and thereby deny you access to something that you feel people should be able to read if they choose to. Banning books also dismisses a librarian's expertise in assembling collections that contain diverse viewpoints. Books targeted by the current epidemic of book bannings are often written by members of marginalized groups. This censorship silences the voices and erases stories from marginalized groups. The goal of much of current book protests is to present a sanitized version of history and a narrow view of human sexuality. This wave of library censorship seeks to eliminate references to historical racial injustice and diverse human sexuality, among other things. Conservative national organizations push this agenda by providing lists of books deemed offensive to local activists who can then use them to request bans from local school boards and libraries. It is not unusual for those proposing that a book be banned to have never read it. Some of the core values of ethical education in our children's program are: everyone is important and unique. Everyone deserves to be treated fairly and kindly. One can learn from everyone. How can we realize this if we ban diverse voices? My observations are as an outsider. Now we have a chance to hear from a real insider, Dr. Christopher Harris. Dr. Harris is the director of a school library system in Western New York and a senior policy fellow with the American Library Association. He was a participant in the first American Library Association Emerging Leaders Program in 2007 and was honored as a library journal mover and shaker in 2008. His policy work with the ALA has included equity of access to ebooks, coding for youth, and most recently, the Unite Against Book Bans campaign. Dr. Harris is an author, speaker, gamer, and member of his local public library board of trustees. Join me in welcoming Dr. Christopher Harris.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to share from the library perspective and talk about this absolutely critical issue that is impacting so many schools and libraries across the country. So as was mentioned, the American Library Association has been working with other partners to really address this through a campaign called Unite Against Book Bans. And so the website, all of the links that are in this presentation will be shared at the end on a collected links page. But just to highlight, the Unite Against Book Bans is the sort of collective page for libraries, community groups, and others that have joined together to say that we need to push back against this attempt to erase whole sections of libraries and therefore whole sections of society, whole groups of people whose voices are being silenced by these attacks. If you are interested in more information about sort of the history of this latest trend towards book challenges and attempts to ban books, PEN America has put together a really comprehensive report called Banned in the USA, and it's available on their website. Again, all of these links will be provided, but I just wanted to call attention to this one as a really nice overview of the challenges and what's going on. So let's talk a little bit about history. Book challenges are natural. They are an occurrence in libraries of all types. And oddly enough, libraries actually welcome the opportunity to have frank and honest conversations about book choices. We select books. We build our library collections with all of our possible professional expertise and all of our best intentions, but we always welcome input from others. That's part of being an advocate for the First Amendment. The First Amendment includes not only, freedoms across religion and information, against censorship from the government, but also includes the right to petition the government for redress of concerns. And so when patrons come to their local library or their school board, they are petitioning the government for the redress of concerns. And that is a very critical right. And so, as you can see in this, graph here, from 2000 to 2020, there were about 250 titles challenged a year, and that remains relatively consistent. Books come out, uh, a child checks out a book, or somebody sees a book on display in the public library, and they have questions, and they say, "Hey, we're not sure about this. We have concerns. Can we have a conversation?" And that's wonderful. We welcome that. The issue occurred in 2021 when, as an extension of other unrest and growing movements amongst more national conservative groups, the number of unique titles challenged per year began to skyrocket. As you can see, about 1,800 in 2021, had increased to 2,500 by 2022. And last year, an absolutely staggering 4,240 different book titles were challenged in attempts to ban them or remove them from school and public libraries across the country. This is an incredible growth. And in this past year, not only do we see a monumental growth in the number of titles, but also a shift now from challenges against school libraries to challenges against public libraries. There was a 92% increase in attempts to ban books at public libraries, which is really interesting and frightening, because in the past, groups that have been targeting books in school libraries have always told us, "Oh, we're not trying to ban the books. If parents want their children to read the books, they can go check them out at the public library." But now the attacks have intentionally shifted to public libraries and attempts to ban those books in public libraries, because the real goal is truly to remove access to those books from all people, from all places. And so that's something that we're keeping an eye on, but it also means there are opportunities for everyone across the country to be more engaged with this. I also think it's worth noting, as we talk about this, the style of the attacks and what's going on, is to really note that the number of books challenged per attempt to ban books has grown from maybe a single book that someone saw was checked out or they saw in the library, to massive lists of books that are challenged all at once. So last year there were 33 reported to the American Library Association Office of Intellectual Freedom, 33 attempts to ban titles in Florida, but those 33 attempts included a total of 2,672 different titles. So that means 81 titles per attempt. And in 2022, we did see that 90% of the attempts to ban books included more than one title at a time. It wasn't a conversation about a single book, but about multiple books. And an absolutely staggering 40% of the attempts to ban books in 2022 targeted more than 100 titles at a time. So this is an attempt to absolutely overwhelm the system, to overwhelm the conversation, to break down the possibility of having these conversations about the books themselves. Indeed, the goal is outrage, public outrage. And this is an absolutely stated goal from these groups, that they are intentionally doing this in a way to drive outrage, to build pressure, to break down, to clog the system. And what's really striking is that there's no need to do this. There are claims that libraries have some sort of hidden agenda, that we're working towards something, and it's simply not the case. Libraries don't have an agenda. We have collections of books, and every individual reader, every individual user of the library is free to choose where they want to go within our collection. We're not pushing books. We're not requiring reading or access to any books. We're simply making books available to everybody that is in our service group as a library. And that's really key because, a simple collection, a gathering of ideas does not mean that there's an agenda. Libraries are trying to ensure that they have books on the shelves and other resources that are relevant for all the readers and all of their possible interests. We strive to make sure that everyone in our service areas can find their story on the shelves, can see themselves in one of our books. And libraries fully support the right and the responsibility of every single family and every individual reader to decide which books are appropriate for them. And we always tell people, if you encounter a book you don't like, keep browsing, pick a different book. There are many books available. And I want to highlight the importance of these word choices. When we talk about libraries and their duties to collect, we are talking about relevance. Relevance is objective, it's norms based, it's applied to the whole student body, your service population. And so if we have one individual or a small group of individuals that may have a certain desire or need for information, we want to make sure that the collection includes resources for them, resources for everybody. And it's a decision made by professional librarians. We will not attempt to tell you what is appropriate or not, because that's an individual, subjective family decision. Families have beliefs, individuals have beliefs, and we respect that. But when you are exercising those beliefs as a family, we do ask that you limit it to just your family, to just your individual choices, that you get to make decisions about yourself, your family, your children, but not about others, because that would infringe upon their rights and their responsibilities to be appropriate decision makers for what they want to access. All of this is not that radical. Our actual library goals and beliefs really resonate across the country. That libraries collect books for many different readers in the community, that everyone gets to decide, that we respect these parent rights, that we respect absolutely the freedom of choice and that decision to decide what goes on in each individual household. But if not picking up a book is freedom of choice, it was so great the way that it was described earlier. Banning a book restricts everyone's freedom, and that's something that we cannot allow to happen. And it's not radical. As I said, many voters agree in polls that the role of the library is important, that voters report a very high level of confidence in their local library's collection development. They agree, 76% of voters and 72% of parents, that while parents can set rules for their children, they don't have the right to restrict other families through book bans. We're going to see these numbers repeated over and over again in multiple surveys. That many voters, a strong majority of voters, agree that young people need to have wide access to books that include diverse content so that everyone has a chance to find themselves on our shelf. And again, these numbers are repeated consistently. 78% of voters in an IPOS poll said that they will consider support of book banning when they make decisions in voting in 2024. That Americans would never ban books that they disagree with politically. That doesn't, measure up to our strong beliefs in America as individualism and that right and that freedom to access information and make decisions. 91% say, look, if you don't like the book, just don't check it out. It's very easy to avoid books in the library that you don't want to read. We have so many other options. Only 12% of Americans would remove books based on parent objection. Again, this is a very small minority of people that have been having a very outsized voice in this conversation because they're leveraging national groups, these lists, and really bringing these overwhelming attacks against books, hundreds of books at a time, in order to break down the system. Libraries, voters agree, and Americans agree, should respect and represent all ideas, even some that can be uncomfortable. And 74% of parents agree that book bans really infringe upon their parental rights. So when groups talk about the importance of parental rights, libraries agree with that. We're just trying to represent and look out for every parent's rights and ensure that every child and every parent and every individual has access to the information that they want to access. And we're not alone in this. We are so grateful to have so many different groups that have joined in the Unite Against Book Bans as partners and that are working on this, from the Interfaith Alliance that put out a great report about banned beliefs that talks about the need for people of all faiths to come together and protect against book bans. Authors that have joined together, and Authors Against Book Bans, the National Coalition Against Censorship, and First Book, a nonprofit group that ensures that children have access to books. All of these groups are working together because these are not radical beliefs in some library agenda. It's just this idea that libraries are important and that access to resources and materials is critical. And we really like to state, in our world in libraries, everyone belongs. So how can you engage? How can you be a part of the conversation and work with librarians? I think we're entering a new and rather dangerous part of this ongoing attack against libraries and books that is leaving librarians across the country confused and afraid, because the latest attack has been an attempt to criminalize um, the actions of school and public librarians for just making books available to people. And so 5 states have fully enacted these criminalization laws: Indiana, Missouri, Montana, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. In fact, in Indiana, it is now a felony just giving minors what are termed obscene or harmful materials, uh, punishable by up to 2.5 years in jail and $10,000 in fines. That's confusing because the word harmful is not a very descriptive or clear term, especially for a felony law. The goal is for libraries to engage in what's called self-censorship, for librarians enacting out of confusion, out of fear that we must acknowledge and respect. The goal is for the librarians to decide maybe not to buy a new book, maybe not to have, George M. Johnson's All Boys Aren't Blue, which is indeed one of the most challenged books, to not have that book on their shelves. And then a child that needs that book that, George M. Johnson talks about, if the book is not there, you need to write it. For the child that needs that book to not be able to find it is truly harmful and dangerous. And so these laws that have been passed are very problematic because they create this chilling effect on what librarians are doing. Now, one of the things that you can do is, using the American Library Association's advocacy tools, you can track library legislation that's happening in different states. And so you can see here in this tracking map the number of different bills that have been proposed. Now, there are bills that are pro-library. There are bills that are supporting libraries. And indeed, many of these states that have these negative bills as well. Libraries are working constantly to advocate, to engage with voters, to engage with their communities, to send messages. And they've been relatively effective in many places, but it is a constant challenge each legislative session, each year, to push back some of these truly dangerous bills that are seeking to criminalize or remove access to libraries. One of the trends that we've been seeing lately is when groups are unable to ban books, they will then attempt to defund libraries, to take away all of the library funding. And that removes access then to everybody. Really, voting matters, especially local voting. Book banning issues are decided by state legislatures. That's where these criminalization laws are coming into being. County or city elected officials often appoint public library boards, or they control the funding. So ensuring that you are an active, an informed voter is very important. The American Library Association is working with the League of Women Voters on, a voter registration drive, get out the vote drives, but also ways to leverage libraries as information hubs in the community to help provide nonpartisan information about what's going on. Communities, as we saw earlier, individual voters are interested in supporting that access to information and the role of public and school libraries and other libraries. And they are looking at these, support for book banning as an election issue that will impact their decision when they vote in 2024. Additionally, school boards make decisions about book selection and book removals. So that is one of the important roles of the school board, is to establish policy in terms of which books are added to the library collection. And so voting or participating in local school boards or local library boards is a great way to be part of the conversation. So knowing what's going on, attending meetings, showing support is a great way to get involved and be a part of this. And additionally, when challenges do happen at a local school or public library, we would suggest that first, take a deep breath. Trust the process. Not all challenges are bad. We've always had challenges, but they've been conversations. Abuse of the system and abuse of challenges that are targeting hundreds of books and not allowing a process to take place, not allowing a real conversation seeking resolution to take place, that's always bad. That's always problematic, because when the goal is outrage, not resolution, there's no opportunity for a conversation. So slow down, let the library follow their policy and be thorough. We've seen in many cases that have gone to court or other adjudication processes that the library following a process, following the policy is noted and is respected. In many cases, as was noted, these groups that are bringing the challenges haven't even read the books. And when that comes out, it shows that this is a politically motivated stunt, not a conversation about the real content of the book. Now, if policy isn't followed, more action is needed, because policy for school boards and library boards has the effect of law. We are required in schools to follow board policy. We are required in public libraries to follow the policies set by the library board. And so if they aren't followed, then there is an opportunity for additional conversation or perhaps legal action. But that's not the end of the road there. In many cases, judicial review is favoring access to books in libraries more recently. So we are looking to, advance that conversation. We always welcome engagement, but trust the process, work with the library, communicate with the library to the extent possible, and see what type of help they need. Do they need people showing up at the school board or the public library meeting? Do they need people showing up at a town or county municipal meeting to show support for the library and funding or other processes? Now, I come from New York State, and we are very lucky in New York State because New York recently has had a lot of love for libraries. Moms for Liberty submitted an appeal to the Commissioner of Education. The Commissioner of Education in New York State sort of sits as a judge in actions dealing with boards of education. And Moms for Liberty submitted an appeal because a school district in New York State reinstated books that they had previously voted to ban. And the commissioner decided that those books should stay and that the Board of Education was in fact right to reinstate those books and was perhaps wrong to have removed the books in the first place. The books were banned because of content around LGBTQ plus and racial content. And that really came out in the commissioner's decision that was not appropriate. I love this quote from the commissioner's decision as well, that the petitioners, Moms for Liberty group, their argument rests on sort of this idea that books that portray human sexuality are per se or absolutely objectionable and subject to exclusion from school libraries. And yet there is no authority for that. There's nothing that says books about sexuality, a very human aspect and very relevant to high schoolers who are, in a sense, raging bags of hormones. This is what they're going through. They're looking for books that help them explore, are they looking to become sexually active? One of the first books that really drove a lot of challenges in this country was Judy Blume's Forever, that talked about that, sort of awakening of sexuality and the struggles that young children and or young people go through when they're looking at that. So the commissioner fully acknowledged that each of the challenge books contains some vivid and detailed accounts of sexual interactions, but that alone is not enough to justify their censorship. Dr. Betty Rosa went on to say that even the use of sexuality in books as a pretext to target books that are by or about LGBTQIA plus or BIPOC authors, or talk about BIPOC or LGBTQIA plus characters, using that sexuality as a pretext does not excuse that attack on civil rights aspects. So Title IX and Title VI of federal civil rights law, and in New York State we have human rights laws and other laws in the state that protect these classes. And so it was a very strong denouncement of book banning and a lot of support for the important work that librarians are doing as defenders of intellectual freedom. And indeed, this discussion about what is obscene is fully described in case law. We often hear, attacks against libraries thrown about, that libraries have pornography, or libraries are doing these things with filthy books, and it's just not the case. Uh, One of the biggest problems is that the words being thrown about don't actually have any official legal definition, and so it's very easy to throw about words that have no meaning. But in this case of obscenity, in the question of obscenity, there is a strong legal test, the Miller test. And the absolute truth is, you know, these books in the school library will never be found to be obscene, because if they were truly obscene, they never would have been purchased by a professional school librarian. They just wouldn't be in the collection in order to need to be removed. The Miller test really looks at three aspects of a book. And so if you do hear books being described as obscene, um, number one, that's a definition that only a judge, a legal case, can decide if a book is obscene or not, and it must apply, it must meet all three of these very stringent standards. And the most important thing about two of these standards, the first and the third standard, is that they must consider the book as a whole, not taking passages out of context to read in an attempt to generate outrage, or create confusion and panic at public meetings. The book taken as a whole must be considered. And when you really look at that, especially the third standard, the book taken as a whole must lack serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Those are the very aspects of collection development that librarians follow. And so again, the books that are being selected are not going to show up as obscene books. So what more can you do? You can find or consider starting perhaps a local group supporting libraries if you're seeing this as a real issue. There are groups around the country. Florida Freedom to Read Project has been very active in Florida fighting against tax and censorship efforts there. Louisiana Citizens Against Censorship sprang up and was very successful working with public libraries in Louisiana. There are broader groups like Defense of Democracy and other groups that are pushing back against nationally well-funded astroturf groups that are bringing these book challenges. Texas has the Freedom Fighters, school librarians that are working against schools. So a lot of these groups are listed on the UABB website, or there are other ways to find them. Again, what we would really ask is that you communicate and work with the librarians and other groups. See if there is a group existing already that you can join and work with. See if there are other ways that you can help. There are lots of things going on, and we want to make sure that we're all working together so that we're really bringing the strongest arguments forward as we're addressing these. Another thing that I think that any of us can do, ALA has started a Dear Band Author sort of a postcard campaign. And I think, it's really important to acknowledge that these books that are being banned are attacks not only on the book itself as a physical construct, but attacks on the people that are represented, the characters that are included in the book, their identities are under attack. So it's important to reach out and send love and support to the students or the communities that are representing the lived experiences that are attacked in these book bans, but also to acknowledge that these books have authors, that these authors in many cases, like George Johnson, are telling their stories and sharing their personal lived experiences. And so attacks on the books are attacks on the author as well. And so ALA put together a campaign to, send, postcards or social media messages to the authors just to let them know, hey, thank you. Thank you for writing these important books that tell stories that help readers find themselves on the shelves of our libraries. So you can find other partners on the Unite Against Book Bans website. There's a whole list of organizational partners, both nationally and locally, and states and local communities. And so that's spread out there. There's also an extensive toolkit available on Unite Against Book Bans that can help you as individuals or members of a local community action group discuss talking points, how to contact media or decision makers, how to engage in the grassroots organizing, how to engage in social media. There are some branded materials and items for social media. So the American Library Association, ALA, is really working with all of these different groups and wanting to provide these toolkits and resources. And it's an ever-growing collection of resources on the Unite Against Book Bans website. So one of our newer additions are the book resumes. So working with different library associations and book publishers, putting together these resumes that talk about the books, that provide, just quick information. So if you hear a book that comes up and somebody says, oh, this book, have you heard about this book? Well, you can go to Unite Against Book Bans and look at the book resumes provided there and see, the real story of the book. Professional reviews that have been written about the book, awards that it's won, recommendations for the book in terms of relevance and where it might fit in libraries, done by professional book reviewers. So we have all of those opportunities available. So just to really sum up, libraries are such an amazing place. And one of the big things to know is, we go to the library, we walk in there and we're just surrounded by possibility, surrounded by all of these possibilities, all of these stories that are collected on the shelves, all of these lived experiences, all of these opportunities for children, readers, adults, for everyone who comes into the library to find themselves or to find someone entirely new, to find a lived experience that doesn't represent their viewpoint, to find and grow as a person because they can empathize, because they can review additional information, to review additional lives, to see experiences that they haven't had themselves. So many different possibilities. And I think it's important to also pause and recognize where these great graphics have been coming from. So I was honored to lead a national leadership grant project for libraries funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, which is the federal funding group behind museums and libraries and their work. And we worked with Gaping Void, which is a culture design group, a marketing firm, to help tell the story of what libraries do, because libraries have changed so much. And, it's not about shh and all of those things. Libraries are active, lively spaces. They are places for the community to come together. They are one of the few non-commercial places where community groups can gather, where individuals can go and engage to access internet, to access computers, which are so critical for every aspect of our lives right now. to find places with trusted information advisors, and to find all of those books, all of those stories, all of those lived experiences. And so we really do want to share that and to say thank you to all of you for coming and learning more about what's going on in libraries, the challenges that we're facing, and the opportunities that we continue to push through these challenges to ensure that we are meeting our mission of helping everyone find themselves on the shelves of our libraries. So just to leave you with this, we would welcome you to join the campaign, to sign up if this is something that you're passionate about and engaged with. You can sign up and join Unite Against Book Bans, and we'll send you not too many emails, but if there's an issue, we ask where you are with your zip code, so that if there's an issue that comes up in your location, in your region, that you could then take action, and you'll receive an email and just let you know, hey, something's going on, and maybe you could help us spread the word about the need to engage, to really come out and work with us to defend that freedom to read and defend all of the stories that are on our shelves. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Christopher, for such a informative talk today, and to let us know the challenges that are before us, and that there is organized efforts to oppose the book bans that we hear so much about constantly in the news. Now is the time when we have for some questions for Dr. Harris, and I request that you put questions in the chat, and I will attempt to read some of them. We don't have a lot of time, so I will encourage people to use the chat rather than raising their hands, because there are hundreds of people, 161 people in our audience, and it would be very hard for me to sort that out. So let me take a look at the chat and see what we have here. Please put your questions in the chat. In the meantime, Dr. Harris, how many other times do you have to speak on this occasion to other groups? Is it a frequent thing? Is there a demand for this out there now?
There is a growing demand. So we've done a lot of conversations with librarians and sort of internal to the library profession, bringing everybody up to speed and awareness, and really trying to push the proactive approaches to working with collection development and being ready for book challenges. But now we're trying to reach out to Unite Against Book Bans and really talk to other groups, to other community groups, to other faith-based groups with the Interfaith Alliance, to other groups that are concerned about education and learning and reading, like First Book, and to really make sure that we're going outside of our library walls and inviting everyone to join with us in the Unite Against Book Bans, and to really understand what's going on and why this is such an important issue. So we are trying to reach out to more and more community groups and other types of audiences to share this.
We have a question from Paul Firth in Baltimore, and he asks, what are there conservative, specific conservative organizations that are funding this effort to ban books that you could tell us about?
Yeah, it's, these are sort of dark money groups. Many of them are 501c4s, and so they have the ability to obfuscate where money comes from. They don't have to report funders, but there is a lot of money involved in this. We do know that a lot of the money is coming from groups that are simultaneously attacking libraries and attacking public education, and sort of using this as a way to push for the removal of our long established and excellent public education systems. And so there is a lot of money tied up in that, because it opens up new money for vouchers and other issues.
Okay, thank you for that dimension of this. We have a question about if you're familiar with Project 2025, which is the sort of game plan for a new Republican administration. Does it address book banning in that document? Do you know?
It addresses, ongoing attacks against public education and information. It certainly addresses attacks against many of the groups whose lived experiences are represented in the books that are most often challenged and banned. And so I think it is all wrapped up in a single larger issue of attacks against um, historically marginalized communities that are, continuing to gain traction, to gain rights, and to gain appreciation in the broader community. And this is, that last gasp effort to kind of fight back against the growth of society and our move forward.
Great. Uh, Lynn Napoli from Long Island asks, have any classics been banned? If so, which ones might they be?
Um, Classics in a sense of those truly older books. Um, some of them have been challenged. What we're really seeing are books from uh, like the 60s and the 70s. The Bluest Eye, that is recommended on the AP literature reading list, that I've got to be honest, is not flying off the shelves of most libraries. It's a challenging book to read. And yet, that book is being attacked. When we think of like the true classics, most of them are representing the lived experiences of a more white experience, sort of that Western experience, and most of the attacks are in books that represent LGBTQIA or BIPOC experiences.
Okay. Mike Chase writes, what's the status of HR 6592? Or are there other actions in Congress to push back against book bans?
At the federal level, there is ongoing work. However, because of sort of the deadlock nature of Congress at this point, there isn't a lot of potential for advancement at a federal level. There is advancement at the state level. Some states have passed legislation or are considering legislation to limit book challenges. I do have to say, as a strong defender of the First Amendment, I'm concerned about attempting to legislate to say that books cannot be challenged, because it is the right of every citizen to petition the government for redress of concerns, and that is an important conversation. I do, however, fully support the enactment of local policies in school boards and public libraries that place limits. We already have limits in many cases in school boards on public comment, because otherwise fully open public comments can be used to derail the system, to break the system. And so book challenges, policies can be enacted to say, yes, you can absolutely challenge books, but you can challenge one at a time. That you need to be a parent or a library customer. You can't be from outside the community challenging books. And so, we're looking at policies like that to ensure that the opportunity exists to engage in conversations, but that the conversations around books don't turn into, challenging hundreds of titles at a time in an attempt to overwhelm and break the system.
Thank you. Uh, Kathleen O'Connell writes, what is a banned book that you would especially recommend for an adult to read?
Oh gosh. Um, you know, it, it's more of a conversation that libraries engage in something called reader advisory, and so we try and talk to you about what books you like, and so go to your local library and ask the librarian there, who is definitely a book expert and can help advise that. However, I really appreciated the inclusion of a quote from George M. Johnson's "All Boys Aren't Blue." I found that to be a very good read, and for a book that is held up to be and is attacked often in terms of sexuality. If we really look at the book as a whole, uh, sexuality is not an aspect of the book. Depictions of sexual interactions in the book are awkward or included as a way for George M. Johnson to talk about being a survivor of sexual assault. So there's nothing titillating about this book. It is a difficult read in that sense that it is a soul bearing of the challenges that he went through and survived, and able to now talk about those experiences.
Okay. Do the laws criminalizing the distribution of banned books include affect privately owned bookstores as well? Have there been attempts to affect what can be sold from bookstores?
Um, Again, I talked about the sudden rise in this past year in 2023 against challenges in public libraries. So initially they were challenges in school libraries, got to protect the kids, keep the kids safe. But if they really want the books, you can go to a public library or you can buy the book. But now we're seeing challenges in the public libraries and attempts to further erode that. And yes, there have been attempts in some states to legislate what can be sold in bookstores. The criminalization laws are on the books in basically every state. Has these laws that prevent the sale of obscene materials to minors or to anybody. We've seen this now in an increase in laws affecting the access to pornography or erotic content on the internet writ large across states. And so there are many laws in the books. What these laws fail to realize is that it takes away that individual decision. And so it's easier to attack the public institutions because of the use of public funds or the expectation of these institutions that's serving the public. But there have been attempts to push back on book distributors, book publishers, and bookstores as well.
Thank you. Can you describe how internet access to books has influenced efforts to ban books?
Yeah, it's
Surely
Has
so.
books been banned on the internet as well? Yeah.
it really is a challenge when you consider the internet, because here we are talking about attempts to remove access to books, and yet every kid pulls out their cell phone and they have access to the everything. The entirety of the world is on their phones. And so it is a fascinating conversation there. The internet is much more open in many senses. So the Brooklyn Public Library made available digital copies of books to loan out, so that anybody across the country who was in a school district or public library region where one of these books was banned could go to the Brooklyn Public Library's website and check out a digital copy of the book. And so, there is a sense, there are attempts to attack all of the books and to attack books in digital libraries. And some, the result has been in some instances, because these books can't be restricted or removed as easily, that entire swaths of digital libraries and the internet are being shut down in states.
Oh my. Okay, thank you. One last question here from Colleen. Do you know of any books that have been rightly banned from libraries? An example of a book that was removed that you felt that was a good decision?
It's hard to say because, in a sense, not that it's intended as a gotcha question, but in the context of what we're talking about, if we're really looking at obscene materials, they wouldn't be in the library in the first place. Truly obscene materials wouldn't be purchased or collected in the library in the first place. What I can say is that there have been conversations about books, and conversations about, hey, this book was in, the middle school library. Maybe it's better placed in a high school library, based on the content of the book. Maybe it's the characters are more, adult or high school age characters. And so maybe it shouldn't be in the middle school. Maybe it should be in the high school. We welcome those conversations. libraries constantly engage in, movement of materials as we look at them, as we consider changes. We're constantly engaging in removing materials through a process that we refer to as weeding. So like weeding a garden, when books are no longer being checked out, when they're no longer relevant to our readers, we're removing books. So are there books that have been rightly removed? Yes, all the time. Libraries rightly make a professional, expert decision to remove books that are no longer relevant, no longer checked out, have become damaged. And so we do remove those books all the time. Sometimes these are brought to our attention by patrons, and again, we welcome that. What we don't welcome is abuse of the system and attempts to wholesale, erase whole swaths of the library.
Well, Dr. Harris, I thank you for your talk today and for your deep dive into the subject that's very pertinent today in society, that relates to freedom, that relates to ethics, that relates to what our values are as communities, and tackles the tough question of when is censorship legitimate and when is it something that is a political ploy. So thanks again. I am now going to close our formal part of the meeting today, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We're going to have breakout sessions shortly, so don't go away. The American Ethical Union's All Societies platforms is a place for ethical societies, friends, and other progressive allies to learn, grow, and spend time in community. We're grateful to today's speaker, Dr. Christopher Harris, and the American Library Association, which works to provide leadership for the development, promotion, and improvement of library and information services and the profession of librarianship in order to enhance learning and to ensure access to information for all. If you were inspired today or learned something new, or if you'll stay to connect with a few friends in the breakout sessions that will happen soon, I'll hope you consider supporting the All Societies platform with a donation. Your donation allows us to bring in great speakers like Christopher Harris and allows us to partner with organizations like the American Library Association, who further the union's mission to nurture and inspire ethical communities and create a world that is democratic, compassionate, just, and sustainable. I hope you will give as generously as possible to support the ongoing work of the American Ethical Union. However you give, thank you for your support today, and we are grateful. You can see our production team here who works on all society platforms, and it's terrific that you're here today. And I now invite you, as the conclusion of our meeting, to join one of the breakout sessions and to discuss this further with your friends and acquaintances and people who you don't know yet in the breakout session.